The thing no one tells you about drop pods? They don't scream. You do. And if you're lucky, you stop screaming before the ground hits back. It was like being fired out of a cannon inside a coffin, compressed between heat, pressure, and pure kinetic rage. The hull around me groaned as friction scorched the pod's outer plating. Outside the viewport, the void rushed past in angry reds and purples. I caught a glimpse of Earth's glow behind me, dimmed by the shadow of the enemy cruiser. An ugly, knotted thing that looked like a tumor made of bone and rust. Above it, the remnants of Earth's orbital shield flickered like dying neon. They were supposed to protect us. They didn't. Mission, Operation Helldrop. Target, Scourge. Warship, Chittervault. Objective, breach, disable, extract optional. Not exactly a vote of confidence. 5 seconds. Captain Ibarra's voice crackled over the comms, calm as ice despite the roaring descent. You could always count on her to sound like she'd rather be drinking coffee than dropping into an alien murder hive. I ran a quick systems check. Armor joints green. Pulse rifle hot and locked. 40 rounds, magnetoplasma needles, nasty stuff, but it only stays nasty if you land the shots. Exo frame aligned to my spine and balance core. The neural sync kicked in, a little late. I felt the zap at the base of my skull like someone had snapped a rubber band into my brainstem. Try not to eat it on entry, Maya, Spence chimed in over local comms. His voice always carried that charming arrogance that made you want to punch or kiss him, depending on the day. I'm not pulling your crispy remains out again. Please, I said, checking my mag levels without missing a beat. You're the one who eats it first and calls it tactical improvisation. He laughed. We both knew we were stalling. Even jokes are armor out here. The pod slammed into the Scourge cruiser like it wanted to punch a hole through the damn planet. My spine compressed, ears popped, and I swore my bones flexed. The view outside flared with impact fire before vanishing completely. The breech plate blew forward with a heavy whoomp, and just like that, we were inside. I stepped into the corridor and felt it under my boots. Alive. The interior wasn't steel and circuits. It was organic, semi-translucent, lit from within by a greenish-blue bioluminescence. The walls moved, like lungs pushing air, or like a throat waiting to swallow. Go, go, go! Ibarra's command snapped us into motion. 8 of us poured out in staggered pairs, weapons up, angles clear. I took the left flank while Spence took high right, his rifle pivoting like clockwork. We weren't special. We were just one pod out of thousands that had dropped from orbit at terminal velocity, hoping to crack alien skulls before we got vaporized ourselves. This wasn't a last stand. It was a middle finger. We were the drop corps, multinational, elite, and way too stubborn to die quietly. The first wave hit hard. 3 Scourge drones rounded the corner, bone-bladed arachnids with too many joints and not enough skin. Their chatter was like steel scraping stone. One of them launched at me, and I instinctively dropped to a knee, letting my pulse rifle cough 3 short bursts. The plasma needles sliced through its thorax, spraying thick black fluid that sizzled when it hit the walls. Spence took out the other 2 mid-lunge because of course he did. Show off. Clear, he called, but Captain Ibarra was already moving, cannon lit with a slow burn in her arms. She looked as calm as a surgeon. We pressed forward, deeper into the guts of the ship. It fought us the entire way. Organic doors slammed shut behind us. Vents spat out spores. Nguyen, our quiet Malaysian fire team lead, torched a wall that tried to regrow over our path, his flamethrower hissing like an angry dragon. They're trying to isolate us, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. We hit the main shaft. Long vertical climb, no gravity, no handholds. Our mag clamps hummed as we walked up the walls like inverted ghosts. At the top was the control node, the ship's brain. If we blew it, the whole system would shut down. Charge is primed, Ibarra said. You know the drill. I slapped my pack against the wall near the neural filament cluster. Fleshy, pulsing, leaking something that smelled like burnt fish and ammonia. It twitched when I touched it. Not a great sign. Then they came again. Drones in tighter waves, faster, meaner. This wasn't a defense. It was panic. One of them sliced at Ortiz's shoulder before I could blow it back with a short burst. Her armor held, barely. She snarled, slammed it into the wall, and drove her boot through its head. "You okay?" I asked, panting. "Better than it is." We fought back to back, holding the hallway. Eber counted down the charge. 30 seconds. Something else moved inside the ship, something that didn't sound like the Scourge. It howled, low, wideband, deep enough to rattle your ribs. The whole corridor quivered. It wasn't just the ship reacting, it was hiding. I turned toward the source and saw something I'll never forget. A group of Scourge drones. Hardened soldiers, the ones that never retreat, were backing away. They weren't looking at us. They were looking behind us. That's when I knew something was wrong. Terribly, impossibly wrong. Because for the first time since they arrived, the Scourge were running. We didn't have time to chase what the Scourge were running from. The explosives ticked down, the ship screamed like a wounded animal, and we were still neck deep in its gut. Ibarra was already moving, and we followed, because if you didn't follow Captain Ibarra, you died. Simple math. Nain Ortiz, rear security. Maia Spence, clear the forward junction. Everyone else, stay tight. This place is about to go sideways. It already had. The corridor bucked under our feet like it was trying to shake us off. Vents hissed hot steam. I kept my rifle high and swept the archways ahead. Spence stacked up behind me, breathing heavy but steady. He was covered in ichor and ash, but his aim hadn't drifted even a centimeter. "Why would they retreat?" he whispered, low enough that the others couldn't hear. "That's not how they fight." "Don't know," I replied, keeping my voice even. "But I'm not waiting to find out." We hit the core access junction, a huge open chamber ringed in nerve fiber scaffolding and pulsing conduits. It looked like the inside of a rib cage, with biotech organs suspended from the ceiling, twitching with slow peristalsis. In the middle of the room sat what looked like a control pillar. Except it wasn't tech. It was a brain. Bigger than a tank, wrapped in bone lattice and wrapped in black veins like tree roots. Nguyen stepped up to it, rigging the last of the charges with clinical precision. He worked like a machine, even with fresh blood on his armor. "You think it's smart?" Ortiz asked, eyeing the neural cluster. "Like, aware?" "It better not be," he muttered, "because I'm about to give it a migraine." We sealed the charges. Ibarra confirmed the detonation sync and pointed to the secondary corridor leading toward our fallback pod. "Move. This whole place is about to blow in 30. We moved fast, but the ship didn't let us go easy. 3 seconds later, the walls opened. I'm not talking about a breach or a hatch. I mean, they literally split like a mouth, revealing a swarm of fresh drones crawling out of the biomass like maggots from a carcass. These weren't scouts, they were soldiers, armored, fused with jagged plating, moving in coordinated waves. "Contact!" I shouted, already dropping to cover behind a curved bulkhead. Plasma stitched the air. Spence laid down suppressing fire while I lined up shots, targeting joints and eyes. Ian lobbed a stun charge that lit the room with an electric scream, buying us a breath. And then we fought. Not retreating or regrouping, just surviving. Just killing. Ibarra moved like a wrecking ball, her heavy repeater tearing through 2 drones with every round. Ortiz got clipped across the thigh but stayed up, burning down 3 more with a flame burst so hot it turned the air oily. We were trained for these close quarters. We were taught to fight in blood-slit corridors and blind angles. The drop core didn't flinch. We adapted and we killed first. The floor shook again, harder this time. A low, rolling grind passed through the ship like tectonic plates shifting, and then the drones just stopped. They froze in mid-attack. Their eyes pulsed blue, then white. They turned, not toward us, but toward the far wall of the chamber. I saw fear in them. That's what stopped me cold. These things had never felt fear, not once. But now, some instinct older than memory told them to run. The wall cracked, not split, not exploded, cracked, like it was under pressure from the outside. "Everyone on me," Ibarra barked, voice strained for the first time since I'd known her. We fell back toward the drop corridor, laying charges behind us, blasting anything that moved. Nguyen activated the remote as we passed the last threshold. The wall caved inward, and whatever was behind it never got through. Because the chamber was gone, we made it to the fallback pod with 12 seconds to spare, just long enough to feel the detonation ripple through the ship. I could feel the shockwave in my ribs. The lights went dark. The walls sagged. Something inside the Scourge's brain gave out with a wet, sucking sound. We didn't wait. Ibarra slammed the evac button, and the pod ejected in a blink, riding a re-entry trajectory back toward one of our forward orbital launchers. At least, that was the plan. As the pod drifted, I looked down. Earth was still on fire. Parts of the atmosphere still glowed from where cities had burned. I saw the black smudge of Cairo, the shattered coastline of Mumbai, the empty crater where Houston used to be. But there was a flicker of movement, too. Thousands of drop pods still falling upward into the sky. Operation Helldrop was working. We were bleeding, yeah, but we were making them bleed more. Oh, then the briefing alert pinged on our HUDs, automated from Deep Command. Recovered data packet from the Scourge brain node, translated and decrypted. A single phrase. Fleeing vector, predator origin confirmed, coordinates included, vector approaching Seoul in 87 hours. None of us spoke for a full minute. Then Spence said, voice flat, "The hell were they running from?" And Ibarra, always calm, always steady, just smiled like she'd been waiting for this her whole life. "Doesn't matter. If it bleeds, it dies. I don't know what's coming, but I know this. We dropped first." The ride back to orbit wasn't smooth. Re-entry stress made the pod shake like a dying engine, and atmospheric drag turned everything into a furnace. But we held together. We always did. We landed hard on one of the remaining orbital launchers, what used to be the North African defense grid, now converted into a halfway defensional FOB held by a multinational drop core element. The second we touched down, medtechs and engineers swarmed the pod like ants on a live wire, yanking us out and rearming us before our boots hit the floor. "Welcome to Camp Furnace," one of the medics joked. She was short, sturdy, and had the kind of expression that told you she'd already seen more death this week than most people saw in a lifetime. "Hot food's trash, beds are worse, and your odds of dying tomorrow are fantastic. I love what you've done with the place," I said, grinning, even as they stripped my armor for trauma scans. "Smells like melted socks and fear." We reloaded, rehydrated, and got 10 whole minutes to breathe before command called us in for debrief. I'd barely sat down when the hologrid lit up, throwing a web of alien language across the room. Captain Ibarra stood near the front, arms crossed, face hard. Behind her was a multi-panel feed showing what our strike had recovered. Scourge neural mapping, transmission logs, coded migration patterns, and one shared broadcast, translated, annotated, dated. She didn't waste time. "This isn't just an invasion," she said, voice cold steel. "It's a retreat. The Scours didn't come here to conquer, they came here to run." The room stayed dead quiet. "Run from what?" asked Commander Okonkwo from the Kenyan Orbital Vanguard. His armor was scorched down one arm, and he still had blood on his temple, but his voice was rock steady. Ibarra tapped the panel. The alien glyphs shifted into a jagged image, something like a wave of dark tendrils spreading through space. And at the center, a massive void. Not a black hole, just absence. Like space itself was scared to be there. "They call it the worm sign," Ibarra said. "At least, that's the best our AI linguists could make of it. The Scourge has records of entire fleets being consumed, entire systems wiped, not occupied, erased. Spence muttered a curse beside me. I asked the question out loud. Why come here, then? They needed biomass, Ibarra answered. Genetic raw material. Us, the oceans, the ecosystem. Anything with DNA. They weren't here to win, they were here to flee and seed. It made a sick kind of sense. The Scourge's obsession with converting life into sludge, their desperate need to terraform faster than we could burn it back. It was never about domination, it was about survival. And that meant we weren't the only ones caught in the blast radius. Okonko stepped forward. What's the vector on this Wyrm sign? Ibarra didn't blink. It's coming here. ETA, 84 hours. Moving through a collapsed hyperspace corridor left by the Scourge jump drives. My mouth went dry. They left a breadcrumb trail straight to Earth. We didn't wait for more orders. Drop cores didn't work that way anymore. Command was mostly ad hoc now, splits between field units, satellite AI, and whoever was still alive long enough to make decisions. So we made one. If the Scourge were scared enough to run, we needed to see what they were running from. 4 strike teams, global blend. My team was Echo 4, 5 of us. Spence, my right-hand trigger, arrogant, reckless, and somehow still alive despite the odds. Nien, still walking despite a cracked rib and a haunted look in his eyes. Ortiz, bruised but relentless, with a new burn scar across her left cheek and a bigger flamethrower than before. And Lien Jiao, a Chinese orbital pilot and zero-G specialist who didn't say much but never missed a shot. And me. We took a Scourge skimmer that our techs had partially reprogrammed. It still stank of mold and wet metal, and it moved like a wounded insect, but it had stealth fields and fusion drive, which made it perfect for recon. The vector led us to the edge of the Sol system, far past the asteroid belt, toward the Oort cloud. Quiet, empty space. Except it wasn't empty anymore. We dropped out of stealth near a dead moon and saw them. Scourge fragments. Dozens of them. Hulks. Shredded ships drifting in orbit around nothing. At the center of the wreckage, we found the remains of a command node. Still half alive. Still twitching. We boarded. I wish we hadn't. Inside the node, it was worse than anything we'd seen in the Chitter Vault. The biomass had been twisted, carved into something else. Something wrong. Black veins pulsed with oily light. The Scourge corpses looked like they'd been turned inside out. Stripped of data, of structure, of meaning. When connected to one of the core uplinks using a hybrid transcode kit, it took 5 minutes to force a data pulse through. One phrase came back. No language, no reason, only hunger. Then the system failed. Zhao knelt beside a scorched terminal. They didn't die fighting, she said. They were taken apart. We need to go, I said. We've seen enough. No one argued. We left that ship and nuked it from a distance. No point in salvaging what was already infected. On the way back, we didn't talk much. We weren't scared. We were focused. We'd seen the worst. We'd seen something that made the Scourge run screaming through the stars. And we weren't going to wait around for it to knock. I looked out the viewport and saw Earth in the distance. Scorched, battered, and still standing. They had no idea what was coming, but they'd know soon enough, because we weren't going to wait for the fight. We were going to bring it to them. We didn't get orders to strike, we gave them. Once Echo 4 returned from the edge of the system with confirmation of the worm vector, Earth's remaining high-orbit command structures went into overdrive. What was left of Central Command had no illusions about survival anymore. They knew that waiting meant extinction, and the only move we had left was the one humanity always made when cornered. The plan wasn't elegant, but it didn't need to be. It just had to work long enough to hurt. Long enough to punch something in the face and scream, "We're still here." Bara took the lead, flanked by orbital captains, marine commanders, and surviving generals from a dozen collapsed armies. Together, we turned our eyes toward a Scourge dreadnought still anchored in low lunar orbit, largely intact, mostly functional, and filled with just enough enemy infrastructure to be useful if we could take it. We didn't want to destroy it, we wanted to steal it. We weren't soldiers anymore, we were hijackers, saboteurs, thieves breaking into a fortress to make it fly. The assault teams were cobbled together from every surviving branch of the drop corps: Japanese sky breachers, Brazilian exotroopers, Ghanaian close assault squads, Polish fire control techs, and a handful of Martian-trained zero-G engineers who'd been on the lunar outpost when it all fell apart. We were a mess of nations, colors, dialects, and banners, but none of that mattered anymore. All that mattered was that every one of us was angry. I was reassigned to a new strike element, Black Spear. Ebert gave me the nod personally, the way she did when she wasn't saying "don't die," but also absolutely saying, "Don't." Our pod launched under stealth field and silence. No pre-drop comms, no speech, no dramatics, just the cold crack of vacuum, the burn of descent, and the sight of the dreadnought growing larger in the viewport, like we were diving straight into the mouth of something that wanted us dead. This wasn't a standard Scourge ship. It was massive, 3 kilometers long, shaped like a crescent blade made of petrified coral and muscle. The hull was wrapped in external veins and heat vents that pulsed with dying light, and defensive turrets tracked silently across space, twitching like flies on a carcass. We dropped onto the belly, cutting torches punched through the armor while our engineers worked under pressure. I wouldn't wish on anyone. The breach opened into a decompression chamber that was still warm, like the ship had only recently gone quiet. Our boots hit the deck, and the air inside carried that same sickly organic stench we knew too well by now. Scourge resistance hit us fast. Drone remnants, not full squads, but enough to slow us down. We burned them out. Flamethrowers hissed, kinetic rounds tore through them, and pulse rifles lit the corridors like lightning in a cave. We didn't talk much. We moved like a single organism, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Spence fought like he had something to prove. I didn't ask. We all had something. I watched him take down 4 drones in 8 seconds, 2 of them mid-leap. The third one clawed his shoulder. He didn't even flinch, just flipped it and drove his blade into the soft point beneath its eye cluster. Wind-planted detonation charges in a spinal junction and fried the path behind us to prevent pursuit. Ortiz cleared the left flank with a micro-drone swarm she'd reprogrammed in the field. Zhao rerouted internal power flow to keep the ship's propulsion offline until we had control. And me? I took the lead. Not because I was the best shot or the hardest to kill, but because I wanted to be the first one through every door. I wanted them to see me and understand that humanity wasn't here to beg for survival. We were here to take everything. The control chamber was worse than expected. Still partially alive, and still linked to an automated Scourge broadcast signal. When we entered, we saw what they'd been doing, feeding genetic data into broadcast pods, transmitting it out into the void. We killed the lights, wiped the node, and installed our own systems. Wynn patched in a hybrid drive link. Zhao jumped to the central flight systems and began mapping a new course. Ortiz stayed by the blast doors, ready to torch anything that came through. Then the call came. From Earth. Captain Ibarra, voice unshaken, relayed a unified signal across the entire drop core network. Operation Black Spear is live. Dreadnought is functional. Worm vector confirmed. We intercept in 20 hours. All units prepare for escalation. I stood on that bridge, half organic, half human now, and watched the screen flicker as our newly captured ship began to reorient in orbit. Scourge symbols warped across the console. Somewhere deep in the system, the Wyrm vector was growing clearer. This was happening. We were going to meet the thing the Scourge feared most. But this time, we weren't just bringing armor and rifles. We were bringing their ship. We didn't name it at first. No one had the breath. But later, when Spence patched in the new ID tag, the bridge holo flickered to life. A name in bold, angular Terran letters, Vengeance 1. Yeah, that felt right. We weren't humanity's last hope. We were its first weapon. The dreadnought's frame groaned under the pressure of alien forces it was never meant to withstand. The ship's systems were no longer entirely Scourge, but they weren't fully human either. A hybrid of technology, instinct, and a kind of brute force ingenuity we were famous for. It was a miracle the jump even worked. It was a statement that we'd learned to make their tools our own. As we emerged into the void, space itself felt wrong. This wasn't just the cold emptiness of deep orbit. The stars were absent, swallowed or perhaps pushed away by the sheer gravity of the thing we were hunting. It wasn't a black hole, but it had the same effect. Light didn't just vanish here, it retreated. We had arrived on the edge of something the Scourge had never dared approach directly. The logs we'd ripped from their memory nodes had referred to this place in symbols and fragmented neural pulses, descriptions that translated loosely into void deep and devourer wake, a location not recorded as a place, but as a warning. This was the maw they fled from, and now it was our battlefield. Zhao ran diagnostics from the front console, her fingers moving confidently across a mixture of Scourge and Earthborn interface elements, half of which weren't even meant to work together. Nguyen was already configuring the relay pulses and countermeasures, mapping a psychic resonance field into the dreadnought's internal systems. Ortiz, ever efficient, stood by the reactor core with a portable control rig, ready to blow the whole thing if this went sideways. Spence and I stayed close to the viewport, watching the shimmer ahead, an impossible distortion in reality itself, a wound in the universe. The Wyrm sign moved not like a creature, but like a gravitational decision being made over and over again. There were no scales, no claws, just shape, motion, and mass bending around it in quiet terror. "We're not supposed to see this," Spence murmured. "No species is." I nodded. "We're not supposed to do a lot of things." The creature noticed us, not visually. This thing didn't look the way we do, but it felt us. It recognized its own stolen technology, hijacked and twisted by something it didn't understand. And through it, us. Zhao blinked twice, sweat beading on her brow. "It's reading us, not just the ship. Our minds. It's analyzing pattern and probability. It's confused." That's when we hit it. We launched everything: nanite clouds harvested from the Scourge's biocores, signal pulses configured to mimic predatory neural networks, plasma lances wrapped in gravitic shielding. All of it designed to do one thing: interrupt, disorient, not kill. We weren't naive enough to believe that was on the table, but confusion meant vulnerability. The Wyrm reeled. Not wounded, but off balance. It hesitated, the spatial pressure eased for half a second, and that was enough. "Phase 2 is a go!" Ibarra's voice crackled through the comms. Calm, assured, like she'd always known this would work. We locked our drop suits, activated magnetic stabilizers, and launched from the dreadnought's belly, one by one. Not toward Earth, not toward safety, but into the Wyrm. The descent was unlike anything I had ever experienced. No gravity, no trajectory, just movement. Our pods folded through reality in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Light fractured, time hiccuped, and somewhere along the way, I lost all sense of what was up, but I never let go of what mattered. The moment the pod cracked open, I found myself standing on something vast, something textured like a continent made from bone and pulse. Tendrils stretched toward the edges of awareness, like thoughts given mass, and surrounding it all was a pressure that threatened to crush every coherent thought I had. Until I fought back. The others landed around me. Zhao's pod skidded to a halt 10 meters away. She emerged with weapon in hand, already scanning. Spence dropped hard, rolling into a crouch and lighting up a defensive arc as he covered Nguyen, who was focused entirely on the packet we were about to deliver. Ortiz took rear guard, setting down a flame barrier and motion-sensitive drones, each carrying its own version of the message we were about to inject directly into the Wyrm's core. "Maya," Spence said, steady, "you've got lead." I moved forward, not running, walking with purpose. My boots sank into a surface that shimmered between organic and alien memory, like I was walking across the creature's past. As we closed on the core node, we saw it for what it was, a vast nexus of thought, bound in geometry that refused to stay still. Symbols we couldn't read flickered across its surface, but our system could. Wynn was already syncing with it, and Zhao was rerouting its feedback loop to create an opening. And then it reacted. Tendrils lunged. Space buckled. The Wyrm tried to stop us. But we were humans. We didn't understand how to stop. Zhao rerouted the defensive overload into our exoframes, which took the brunt of the backlash. Ortiz used the flame net to disorient the neural flow. She set fire to its damn mind. Nguyen shouted over the chaos that we had a stable channel. This was the moment. I stepped forward, stood on the edge of something that should never have been touched, and I drove the signal home with a single command: inject. The transmission that left us wasn't just code, it was identity. We poured everything into it: memories, pain, stubbornness, humor, trauma, music, laughter, war, peace, our contradictions, our fury, our ability to break and keep moving anyway. We told the worm what we were, and we told it that if it ever came to Earth again, it would learn just how dangerous cornered animals could be. The response was violent, not in the way of battle, but in recoil. The creature screamed. Its body, if you could call it that, convulsed on scales too vast to see. The landscape beneath us crumbled into fractals, and our systems began to burn out from overload. The worm was leaving, not out of strategy or to regroup, out of fear. It had touched us and found something that could not be predicted. It found humanity. We staggered back into the pods, systems failing, oxygen burning down, every nerve in my body screaming, but alive. Zhao pulled us into the Dreadnought's remaining recovery bay. Our ship, not, cradled us like some enormous, wounded titan. Its hull still burned, its systems groaned, but it held. And Earth was still waiting. When we returned, there was a rising wave of cheers across every remaining city, bunker, and orbiting relay. Humanity had survived the scourge. We didn't just survive the unknown, we pushed it back. And with it, the galaxy learned a truth carved into the void by flame and fury. Humanity doesn't wait to be saved. We don't beg for peace. When the sky falls, when monsters rise, when extinction knocks, we arm up, we look it in the eye, and then we drop.